Hi, it's Laura here from the Teaser Pop podcast. If you haven't heard, we've started a book club where Rebecca Elamelitis and I select several non-fiction books, read them together and share how we're going to apply what we learn to our work as educators and entrepreneurs in our monthly virtual book club. Now you can read along with us and join the live conversations that are happening on our YouTube and LinkedIn channels by simply going to the Teaser Pop website and clicking on the book club to find out what we're reading and when our next meetup is. Now let's move on to today's show. Talking about self-limiting beliefs in leadership is my guest, Shane Leaning. Shane has been involved in education for over 11 years. He's been a teacher, a senior leader, and a regional head of teaching development for a large network of schools. He's passionate about leadership and organisational development in international schools, and he provides tailored solutions that recognise the beauty and challenges inherent in education. As the host of Global Ed Leaders podcast, Shane engages with thought leaders to bring research-informed and relevant insights to international school leaders. Let's jump to where I asked Shane about why so many people hesitate in taking on roles in leadership.
This is a real specific but a real common belief that comes up time and time again. And I think, there's certain leaders in the world we maybe have to blame. I think a lot of people think leadership is about good public speaking or charisma. And I think it always comes to mind for me is like leaders like Barack Obama in the US, these kind of very charismatic public speakers. And it's understandable why people think, wow, that's leadership, because it's one of the most visible aspects of leadership, especially when we see good leaders out there or we see really good examples in the media. But it's a funny one, because that is literally just the tip of the iceberg with leadership. And I would say actually it's not at the tip, it's somewhere to the side and probably not the most important part. And I don't think confidence or charisma is the same thing as leadership. Actually, leadership is a lot more multifaceted in that. It's a lot more than talking just in front of people. So if we were to stick with the politician idea, we were thinking of Barack Obama as this big charismatic leader. We might also think of the former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, who was well known for her leadership, often really cited for a steadiness in her leadership, her listening skills. She was very adept at building a consensus. These are all incredibly important parts of leadership, and she was certainly not the leader who was known for public speaking being her greatest strength. So I think while there might be people who are shouting the loudest, look at my leadership traits, and let's face it, they're often men, then it's not necessarily the be all and end all of leadership.
I think you've tackled number one really well. We've knocked that out of the park. Shall we move on to number two?
Let's go for it.
So for number two, people may say, I have a weakness in a particular leadership style. For example, I'm unsure how to create and convey a vision for my team to follow. What would you say to that self-limiting belief?
So I understand that, because I've very personally resonate that with my leadership. I've definitely got aspects of my style that are strong and aspects of the style that are still weak. And one thing I would say is no leader is a master of all the skills needed to be a leader. And I sometimes when I hear it, people talk about, okay, well, you might be weak in an area, but you work on all those areas that are your weak, so you can become this mythical perfect leader who's perfectly balanced. Yet, funnily enough, I've not really met that leader who has this wonderful balance of all skills, because that's actually not how it works in real life. And there's a good reason why it doesn't work real life, is because when we're working as leaders, we don't work on our own. We're generally working in teams. So if I can maybe share an example, when I was in my early leadership journey, I was very lucky to go away and do a little bit of leadership training. And I was middle leader at the time, just an aspiring middle leader. And we did a lot of self-reflection at our leadership styles. And I soon came to realize that my style was very much as a a visionary leader. It's what I get giddy about. I like coming up with these big ideas, visions, like really researching something at the beginning. And I think, I think I'm pretty good project starter. But Laura, I'm not a very good doer when we get going with projects. And I probably shouldn't be saying that in the job that I'm in, but I'm just not. And that was my belief at the time of, gosh, I'm not a great pace setter when these projects get going. Does that mean I'm not up for leadership? When I was chatting with the chap who was presenting, he's told me, and this really stuck with me. He said, "Well, if you identify that as your weakness, what can you do as a leader to get by? Not what can you do to get better at that area, but what can you do to get by?" And what I've realized is, actually, I've got this strength that I can lean on, that I'm a good visioner. And what I need to do when I get down to the doing part is to create robust accountability systems around myself. So to-do lists are my best friend that I must lean on. Otherwise, I just don't do things. And two, I need to work with my team members to say, look, we've got this idea. Hopefully I've inspired you in this idea. How are we going to achieve this together? And hopefully delegate some tasks that I'm not doing all that work, because I know that that's an area that I need support in. And I think that's okay. I don't think the aim is always to master every leadership skill.
There's no such thing as a perfect leader, basically. There's a perfect team, maybe, or a great team, a strong team. But this whole idea that we have to be great at everything is, it's false.
Absolutely. I think, the person who did a lot of work in this on emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman, he looked at several leadership styles, which I think are incredibly useful. So you might have a visionary leadership style, you might have a coaching style, democratic style, pace setting, maybe an affiliative, or maybe sometimes authoritative. And the idea is that you flex these different leadership muscles at different times. But he also recognized that we all have a natural style that we lean on. And I think that it's good to do that work in terms of recognizing where your areas that you're best at are, and your areas that you need support with are, and then work with that. I think if you were to go to Angela Merkel, even though I'm sure she was well aware where her strengths lied and really played on those strengths to the testament of her long leadership. I'm sure if we were to look at the other side, Obama being a public speaker, I'm sure that hides some areas where he gets carried in his leadership journey by the people around him too. And I think that's okay. I think self-awareness is really important. So identifying which areas, and there's loads of online quizzes you can do to identify your leadership style. So maybe we can post a link of there's some in the show notes for this episode. Or if you don't do a quiz, maybe you've got a close mentor who can help you to understand the leadership style that they see you falling into, and how to navigate that. But I guess the main message there would, you don't have to be good at everything. Don't aim for that. Utilize your strengths. And I think as well, for TESOL teachers, there may be strengths that have come from your practice already. Like you might have been planning a lot of courses. That's kind of a common area. So maybe you're a visioner like me. You're a good front planner. Lean on that strength.
I think this lends really well to our next limiting belief, because usually these two go hand in hand. And I can see you're nodding like, yep, we're ready for this one. So when people say, oh, I don't have the particular style of leadership, usually the thing that follows is I don't have any experience in leadership. So that's why I don't apply for that senior teacher role or the assistant director of studies, for example. What do you have to respond to that?
So, well, firstly, it's true. You've never been in a formal leadership role if you're just applying for your first leadership role. Yeah, okay, whatever. That's always the case, right? Everyone makes that next step. So, goodness, don't use that as the reason not to go, because gosh, if everyone did that, there would be no leaders. So, remember, every leader, even the great ones that was not a formal leader to start. But the thing that's great about teaching is that if you think about it, you're already a leader as a teacher. It's what we've been trained to do. We're leaders of learning in the classroom. I don't mean that in some kind of, it sounds a little bit glib, doesn't it? Leaders of learning, but we are actually leading in many different ways. For example, some concrete ways would be we every day have to translate complex ideas into really understandable ways for teaching our students. Gosh, that's no more true than in the field of TESOL teaching, especially. Now that's common, that's a really critical skill in leadership. We also are masters often of conflict resolution, for example, between students, between each other. Yeah, nodding at that. And between, not just between students, but sometimes we have to navigate that cultural conflict between the student and the curriculum we're teaching, especially of recent, where we're all thinking of equality, diversity, inclusion in our curriculum. We're constantly having to challenge ourselves and challenge the connection between the students and the curriculum we teach. It's the exact same way as you might do when you're managing a team and managing that complex relationship that's involved when you've got any group of humans in front of you. You also have to do a lot of motivating, inspiring as part of being a teacher. And of course, one of the biggest levers of great leadership is being able to give quality feedback. And I hope as teachers, this is one thing that we've really developed expertise in. How do we give feedback that is safe for the students, that they can action, and that is meaningful? And it's, these are leadership skills that I think are very transferable if used in the right way to a leadership practice.
You're absolutely right. And I think as we kind of come to a close with this episode, really taking time to reflect, talk to others, get feedback, or use those resources that you mentioned, like quizzes, to assess where we have experience, what we can transfer, what type of leadership lends to our style and our strengths, playing to those strengths, and remembering that leaders are made and not born. And you don't have to be on stage all the time.
Absolutely. I think, I would say a good activity to do would be to do exactly what you've just said on paper. Get it down on paper. Do a bit of skill mapping is what I do with leaders usually. So, identify those leadership skills. First, maybe do one of those quizzes. Where are those natural leadership styles that you're settling in? Then maybe think about the leadership skills you use in your classroom and how do they translate? And this might give you an idea of, oh, actually, this is where I think I might excel as a leader. And wow, this is an area where I wouldn't. So, given those weakness areas, do I need to get some development in that area? Do I need to get some mentoring? Or do I need to recognize that in my leadership journey, I'm going to have to lean on other people for that, which is totally okay in my opinion.
This has been really inspiring talking to you, Shane, and I really hope this inspires people who are listening who may be hesitating, taking on that opportunity or applying for that job to do so, to take the leap. Because like you say, leaders are not born, they're made, and we all have to start somewhere.
Absolutely. And, I think it's not for everyone, leadership, but if it's your calling and you think that actually I could have an impact wider than my classroom, then don't let limiting beliefs be the reason you don't, take the leap.
Thank you so much, Shane, for busting these limiting beliefs out the park and for sharing your insights and expertise. I really appreciate your time today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Laura. Thank you.
To learn more about Shane's work, including his podcast, go to his website, shaneleaning.com. The link is in the show notes for easy access. Finally, you can support the work we do at TESOL Pop by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast, sharing episodes with your community, or by even buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/TESOL Pop.